Hello everybody, hope you're having a good day. Today we are going to do a workshop in networking in Unity. So let's get started. I'm going to start out with a presentation and then move into actually working in Unity. So, because there's a little bit of theory that we have to get through to actually kind of understand what's going on, which I didn't during my game jam when I tried to implement networking, and didn't go as well. So, getting into that, we start off with trying to understand what is UNet, which is Unity Networking, and the high-level API, Application Program Interface. So, here is a picture I pulled off of actually on their tutorial site. Actually, the whole picture encompasses the high-level API of Unity, and what that high-level API does is interface with their low-level API, which actually makes the connections and sends data over between different machines. So up there you'll see things like network identity, network manager, network transform. Some of those components we'll be using today. And they're actually very simple to use to apply to your game objects, which is generally your player or whatnot. It's just that, what's that? So I guess I'll just go on the next slide. Probably would fit it better. So first we need to go through some concepts. So the model up here describes the host client and server relationship. So your machine, if you want to be the host, will contain both the local client and server components. So the server is actually everything that is the thing that connects all the machines together, sends the data across and whatnot. And then you will also be a client. The client is actually the player, think of it as kind of. And then your host machine will reach out and connect to other clients. And this necessarily isn't always the best way to do it. You can have a dedicated server and everyone else can be a client, but it's good enough for right now for us. Some of the situations where you don't want that is maybe like FPS or something like that, and the person being the host might actually have a faster connection or something like that, less lag. But for us, it'll be just fine. So another concept we have to go over is duplication and authority. So in creating, or in this model, so we have the server and two clients, which are basically two players. I'll go over authority first, I suppose. Each client, you want to have local authority over their own player and not other players. So one other important thing is note that these players, player 1 and player 2, are exactly the same basically, and they will be in most games. So like you only spawn one kind of character and then just throw like a different sprite on it or something. But they have the exact same code. So say you, and we'll probably see this later in the actual demonstration, but say you press a button and your character is supposed to do something. Well, your client 1 runs both player 1 and player 2. If you don't have this check in there, both player 1 and player 2 will react to that same button press, even though client 2 isn't actually pressing it. So that's the idea of having a local authority. So Unity kind of handles that as in like it lets you determine which client actually has authority over which player, and that's something we'll be using today. Additionally, the server. Oh, question.
Does that also work for like local multiplayer?
For local multiplayer, you mean two separate like?
Using the networking to do the two separate interactions between controls.
Yes.
Okay.
So like for separate builds and whatnot, even in your local computer, it works just fine. Unity kind of handles that stuff. And if anyone has a question too, like, you feel free to ask too. So also the server has that kind of thing for like objects you don't want to actually have players interacting with. So you can like push that off on the server to handle that. And then duplication. You'll see that player 1, player 2, and enemy all have 3 separate game objects, more or less, that they're actually duplicate it over. So on the client is the one that you're actually accessing, but you can modify that by actually sending calls to the server to modify whatever you're trying to modify, and then the server will actually handle distributing that across all of the clients. So some of the components we'll be working with today are the Network Manager, Network Transform, the Network Manager HUD, heads-up display, and the Network Identity. And it's important to keep in mind that all of these components, Unity might have made for us, but with a little bit of time and a little bit of understanding, you can override these like completely however you want to. So like for instance, the Network Manager HUD is kind of ugly, honestly. So if you want to, you can actually look and see what it actually is doing and kind of copy that over or implement your own. It's a little bit more difficult, and we won't be doing it today, but it's an option. Kind of working with more of the low-level components. So that Network Manager kind of handles all of the connections between the servers and clients and whatnot, starting the game and all that kind of jazz. Network Transform, it is, if you put it on a component, it will allow you to automatically kind of send updates upon transforms of objects. So it says right now once every, or 9 times a second, it will send an update to the server if the transform of the object has changed. And finally, a network identity. You need that on every networked component to tell the server that this is part of the network. And on that subject, it's important to understand what networked components and what non-networked components you need, or what they are in general. So network components are dynamic game objects or such things that will be changing in your scene depending upon like player interaction and stuff like that. So example, the player, the enemy, moving platforms if you have that in your game, or any kind of pickup to like say, hey server, I actually picked this game out, or this pickup up, don't let anyone else have it now, kind of thing. And then you also have non-network components, which are kind of like the static things in your game. So like the overall environment that's not moving at all. Animations, and that depends upon what kind of animation or what kind of game you have. So like if you have a real-time strategy or like mobile or anything like that, you want the animations to play at the same time on everyone's computer so that you can actually see whether or not I have to dodge right now and stuff. But if it's like a board game or something like that, it doesn't matter as much, or the players might want to choose how the animations look on their own machine, and so you can actually just cut that out. But they do have a component that will sync that. And any other things that don't need to happen at the same time or at the same way on the client are non-networked, yes.
So for an example of like the board game thing, would you say a game like Hearthstone would be doing that, where like it doesn't matter that the animation from like a card is played at the same time, it just that it looks smooth on your computer?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Because I know that game's actually made in Unity.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
I think it's in it. That's
a lot of people don't know that Hearthstone is made in Unity, which is kind of interesting because it's Blizzard. I didn't think they'd be using Unity. Nothing against Unity, but kind of surprising. Kind of cool.
So yeah, I don't think they like animate the other players' cards or anything like that. So like that would be even more.
Unless it's legendary, they don't.
Hmm?
So unless it's legendary, they usually don't.
Haven't played Hearthstone very much, but yeah, if that makes sense to you. So we'll jump into a little bit of the syntax, or just like stuff we'll be using today. So this using tag up top, you'll need to include in any kind of network script, which will be on a network game object. Network behavior. So you guys probably normally see mono behavior, mono behavior on most of your scripts. Network behavior is just the, how how do I say it? Is it network behavior inherits model behavior, or network behavior, or it's a subset of model behavior. So you'll still have all the model behavior stuff. You just will have network behavior also. Then there is sync variables, client RPCs, commands, and then kind of like what I talked about, is local player and is local authority stuff. So yeah, kind of what it looks like here, using those two things. So a sync variable, you can simply put it above like an instance variable, and actually it will do most of the work for you in keeping the objects synced over multiple clients, or the variable synced over multiple clients. We'll get into what an RPC is, but it's basically that, but automatic. And it can also have a callback, if you guys are familiar with that at all. So like after the variable changes, it'll run another function if you specify it. So you can customize it that way a little bit. So like an example of this, when you want to use this, is when you want to keep track of player health on the server. That's what we're going to also be doing a little bit of. Command is called on a client but executed on the server. And then the server can actually distribute the new information to the clients again. So like if you want to spawn a bullet to shoot another player, you send out, or you call the command in the code, and then all of the other clients will ignore the actual script here. So like command up top, it'll ignore that, and then it will just run if it is the server. And so it will actually create the bullet and then send it out to everyone, all the clients basically. And then kind of an example, I'm not sure if it works too well. So the client player one has a command sent, and it transfers that to the server, and then from there the server can now do a network server.spawn, and that'll actually spawn that. You also have client RPCs. I think it's a remote protocol connection, and client RPC is just something that's called by the server but executed on all of the clients. So like an example I think they did here was respawning. So like the server actually keeps track of your health and whatnot, and so if it's below a certain amount, you want the actual to send out a signal to that player to you died, respawn, kind of thing. So we have the servers sending out a client RPC, and then the client's receiving that update. And so then there's one more nuance that we kind of need to know, and that's the difference between is local player versus is local authority. So if we go back, oh no, I have it in here, never mind. We're going to be assigning the player prefab of Network Manager. One thing that you might run into trouble with is using is local player or is local authority if you have on that prefab. So like the prefab is just a
template of an object that you can use for other things.
Yeah, so the network manager will handle like spawning the players kind of thing. And so if you call is local player on something that isn't the prefab but is also in that same player, it won't necessarily work. You have to use is local authority. Basically, it's more like when you can see it, it actually makes some sense. But and then I guess I can continue with that later. So if you guys go on to GitHub, I think I put the link up here.
And the link is, I just posted both those links into general of the GDC Discord. So if you don't want to type that in, you can just go there and click on that link.
So, actually I should have tested it with, it's fine. Okay. And then, yes,
So what
give me a
type of
sign
file-
that everybody.
What type of file is this, or how are we using this? How explain to them what we're doing with this file?
It's a Unity project.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, unzip it and then like start it open in Unity. Actually, yeah. I guess I should show where the download button is and stuff like that. Is that what you meant? So if I reload, everything should be up there. So you can go over to clone or download, and then just download zip. And then if you open that, extract, and this is all, I mean, you could do this with Mac and stuff too, but extract wherever you want it to, and then this one is closed. Then if you open it, wherever you downloaded it to, it's in downloads. Go in one level and then right here, ISU GDC _ networking - master. Select that folder and open it. Alright, and then once you get here, just open up the main scene. How's everybody doing on that?
Is anybody having trouble with
Yeah.
downloading?
So once you downloaded it, it should be in a zip format like this. So extract up top.
Yeah, extract the whole folder. I did.
You did? Okay.
And then when you go into Unity, you select Open Project.
Oh, open project.
Yeah, because Unity projects are saved as folders.
Yep. So close out of it again just to show you guys. So if I go open, and it's already putting me here, but downloads this one right here under the first folder, select folder.
Oh, it's not full.
I don't like my animator like that. Okay, so if you play this scene now, all it is just a cube and that, and you can move left and right, not even jumping yet. So our first task is to create the network manager. And actually, I'll say that first. I believe that once we get the network set up, we should be able to all create a match together. How many do we have? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. We should be able to all. I'm not entirely sure. It's a little bit difficult just because Unity only allows you to add a certain number of collaborators for networked projects if you have the free license. So this should still work. And if not, then there's also a backup plan of you.
We can sit down.
You can what?
If there's too many people, we can.
Oh.
Have a few of the experienced people sit down.
Oh, yeah. No, it shouldn't be too many people. It's just that, actually syncing up that they're on this project kind of thing. Because I think I set it up, but also, I'm not entirely sure because I only tested it with my desktop and my laptop.
Oh, you and Evan were able to connect, so that worked. When you passed the version up to Evan.
Oh, that was yesterday. I did more since then.
Oh, gotcha.
So, everybody good? We fine? Good? Cool. Okay. So our first task is actually creating the network manager. So we'll create an empty first, an empty game object. Rename it to network manager, just to keep everything nice. Make sure it's at 000, but that doesn't matter too much. If you go under, you can either search for it, or it's under network right here, and then network manager. So you see that just brings it in right there. And what we can do right now, you see that it has an offline and online scene. We can actually create another scene because I forgot to do this before. Just rename it to something. I called it offline. And drag your main scene into online. Right? Oh, it's probably so no. Duplicate your main scene. Sorry. Rename it to game or something. Save it and go back to your main. So what I did accidentally is network manager is looking for scenes. So before it actually connects you, it puts it it needs to be in a scene that isn't one of those two. So if you go into main, delete your network manager, and actually delete everything else except for the main camera. Right. And then game has the, I deleted the network manager, didn't I? Sorry, I'm a little bit unprepared here. Basically, your main scene will be the one with the network manager component on it. And then it will transition into the game scene. Why is it not? Does it need? Sorry?
I'm reading that the scene needs to be added in the build settings for.
Oh, that would do it. Okay. So go to build settings, and then select all of the scenes here, drag them in.
Does everybody know where build settings is? It's in file,
Yep.
top left.
So-
I still only have one scene.
Oh,
Just make
sorry.
Just make a blank one.
Yep.
So right click and create.
Sorry guys, I didn't remember that network manager needed another scene.
You're good.
Well, I'm off. And then go to save file, save files. And need that date. And put it into I'll go back. Double click on the from C and this will Yep, it's C. Our name is yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Main then game. I'm guessing main then game.
And search.
Doesn't matter.
Build.
Don't know. Just goes.
Drag your offline and your game online.
Got it?
There's person.
So, the file saves the as. And then that thing. So we put it in GC.
Basically, what I did before was duplicated one of the scenes.
And then,
And then-
wait, and then create. I haven't seen any photos.
It'll be called game or something like that. And then if we're going to it's going back to slots. And your the main one, I think the launchers are state manager or the main one. What I would suggest is keeping the way I've done it is I make a list of objects and I call them game trigger.
So how do you even copy a scene?
And on that enter, add that game object to the list. Game object. And on trigger exit, I remove that object from the list. And then in update or whatever, if you want to do an update, I do a for each loop.
So how do you copy a scene? Like he didn't copy copy a scene?
I just basically say enter, and you go up and list it, and now the triggers and then exit gets taken off the list. And the reason that shit's good, but and auto better than running like
Yeah.
control me doesn't do it either.
you have one object and you're probably not another object that's there. Is it build or build?
Oh, don't do either of them. Yeah,
Whereas
it just needs to be.
enter and exit out of the list.
We need
Put in the list. Second,
access
step two.
We didn't put it there.
Works much better for that. I think it would.
It just needs to
Go
go
on
down
to
this and it should be
give the
there.
Discord. So if you look up Unity lists and honestly, if you just look up Unity color, you'll see tons of examples of how people use it. That should help.
Let's just keep on reading chat.
Just rolled the space on Xbox 4. I just got notified.
How's chicken
Took
though?
up 20%. Yeah, I saw that. I just put it before here for 30 minutes trying to fight a Macedon. And I was out
The mechanics are there.
the one was just the giant thing that's in the middle of the lake every time. That's usually peaceful.
Isn't that?
But a little personal twist, you can go take
You
a
open that up.
picture. Instead of running away, I caught it.
Yeah.
This feels like I'm asking people to design drawings.
I caught it at
Give some more
22
freedom.
instead of running away. What?
I have a horrible semester right now. I just don't have time to need some time, so.
I don't actually use Chocobo. I eat Chocobo.
And I'm not just gonna say it's on purpose.
So many Chocobo.
So I'm just gonna say.
Yeah, I don't know anything about programming. I barely work with computer.
I hate to say that.
I'm just here like figuring out how to apply.
It's just,
job
it's just really not a good
in the near future.
I'd like to get it in a good time, but I just don't.
Yeah, so.
That's great. Yeah, I'd actually like, oh, it's level 50. Nope.
So, now that you're not going to be doing a project, so I found that idea. But I did want, I did want to be pushing my own collaborative project, which I'm pushing my own
Absolutely.
Yeah. Gotcha. Because if chip-in was going to work, I was going to hold off and probably do work with someone on it.
Yeah.
And
For actual
then,
player or just overall?
cool.
Everybody else kind of caught up? Good?
Yes.
Okay. So you have your network manager here. You've added to the build path. So you should be able to add your game into your online scene and your offline into your offline scene, basically. So now if you start, you should be able to see. If you don't, might be because your main camera is black, maybe. So we also need the Network Manager HUD. Yes?
Which scene goes, the scene that has the network, which one goes into the offline scene, which one goes to the online?
So the offline scene is just a dummy scene, basically. The online scene is the one that has your player, basically your environment. For me, that is game here. So it has my ground and my player. Otherwise, my main scene just has my network manager.
And the player and ground is the one that holds the network? You said the main.
The main one holds the actual network manager. The game holds the actual game stuff. The stuff we'll be using in. But for now, we are in main under network manager, adding a network manager HUD.
And the people that I help, I accidentally flipped them, so you'll be in game putting main into the online scene.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't allow you to do it otherwise.
Okay, so should I be using game or main?
Game.
Working with the network manager.
I should have named these a little bit better, but so now if you start it, you should be able to see that this HUD appears, and either when you click LAN host, it should pop you into the next scene. All right. And so another thing that we have to do for setup is the player prefab is empty on the network manager. So it's complaining that under spawn info, it requires a player prefab. So what we need to do is go into our game scene, and I'm just going to make a folder called prefabs and drag this player into that folder, and that makes it a prefab. And prefab is, like we said before, kind of like a template to actually make things, make the game object in over and over and over again, like a cookie cutter. So then what we're going to want to do is delete this player in the hierarchy, but keep the one in the prefabs folder. Then if we go back into main, saving that one, go to the network manager. So now we have something to give the network manager for a prefab, and we just place it right in there. Maybe. Missing one more thing, I believe. A network identity. On the player prefab, you add a network identity, and that tells the network manager that it is a networked component. And for now, it doesn't necessarily matter, but for in the future stuff, you want to check local player authority.
Where did the player prefab go? When you made prefab folder, put player as a prefab, where did you put that prefab?
In the prefab.
Yeah.
Oh, in network manager.
Oh, yes. Network manager under spawn info.
Yeah, you need to add a network identity to the player.
Gotcha.
And then hit local player.
Yeah. So what we've done so far is set up the online scene and the main scene. The main scene holds the network manager, which will spawn the player prefab that we've created that has a network identity component on it. So if we add that in there now, it should add. Cool. So now there should be basically.
I got it. So, you have prefab.
Cool. Wait a second. Get in the habit of pressing Control S. Anybody else having trouble?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Can we decide where the player is spawned?
You can.
Can we turn
It's
off
a little bit
auto-create?
more. No, you'll want to auto-create the player, basically.
Because it's spawning me, I think, at 0, and then it's pushing me up into the place.
I thought I moved.
That was what we had.
I was probably spawning. I think I moved the actual ground down a little bit. But basically, you have to encode add a vector 3 and then specify there that you want to spawn there via the round robin stuff. It's more.
Oh,
Just
okay.
like-
So like if you put in like the start in a script and just set its position, do it like that.
Kind of, but also not specifically because the network manager is the thing that's spawning you.
Mm-hmm.
So like you could just get rid of the network manager and spawn it in yourself, or something like that. Or do a round robin thing like that, but that's
Okay.
a little bit more complicated because you have to put in vector 2s or 3s and actually tell it where to spawn.
Yeah. But I can push down the ground then.
Yeah. So Jacob's question was that the actual network manager is spawning you inside the ground a little bit and then pushing you up. You can change that, but it's a little bit beyond the scope of like just starting. So if you want to, you can move down the ground object, not the graphics under it, GFX. The actual ground object, you can just move it down a little bit.
Yeah. -1 works pretty well for position. In the Y, by the way.
So if you're in the ground, you actually push all the other floors on before you up. So that then spun the top.
How's everybody else? Good. Any questions?
Should we see a spawn here?
That's okay.
Just mine go in here, mine are
reversed.
Alright. So are you looking at?
So get rid of ground there.
Well, that is for when you have build also.
Prefab in there. So go into your game or whatever it is. So then delete your player object there because you have it prefab, correct? So now go back to your yeah. So now click delete. So now if you click on land, so nothing should have changed.
Yeah.
However, now the manager is
so
responding to the place.
I'm confused about which way was the network, because I kind of.
So right now you have
Yes.
Okay, so go into your players component. So you don't have a network identity. So what the network identity does is just tells the network that, hey, this is something that we'll need to keep track of. Yep. There you go. And then check is local players around. That basically just tells us, hey, my local machine is actually going to control this thing. You have your online scene. Then if you go back into whatever mode you which is necessary, now just start it like go back into so you have to add your network manager HUD. So the network manager, like we talked about before, like you can override the network manager HUD, so that's why it's separate. Cool. So now it should work.
You were around this one.
It's on Discord also.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that was just made up so that I could make a few sounds, know the
So next, we have the player prefab. Register the player prefab. We can move. So one thing that, to demonstrate an error that we might have, you guys can do this if you'd like to, or you'll eventually probably need to do it, but you don't necessarily have to do it right now. I am going to build my scene. I like to stay organized, so BUIL. So I put my build, which is just packing my Unity folder into an exe, so that I can just double click it and run it separately from the actual Unity editor. So I can build it with I don't know, 1.exe. Sure. Wait for it to actually do its thing. Yes.
So mine says, because you're not a member of this project, this code will not access Unity services. We need to do that. I think you mentioned like how many collaborators you can have or whatever. I'm assuming I won't be able to use the networking stuff while it's like this.
I'm logged out. Can you try logging out of Unity? So saving it and closing it.
Yeah.
And then signing out before you start the thing again.
Yeah, what will that do?
It's what I did on my desktop, just so I could test it. I thought it would work that way, but and then skip offline or whatever. Because it did work on my desktop like that, but I don't know.
Now it doesn't give me that.
Fingers crossed.
Inside around.
So you can choose to do this step or not. I was just going to show it off as an error. What you can do is go up to your file.
I wouldn't create it.
Okay, so if you, so it's a little bit of homework on it, sorry. If you close out Unity, sign out before you start the project, it should work, I think. Fingers crossed. It's just a problem because usually you don't have this many people working on it. So I could add you all individually, but I only have space for like 3 collaborators on the network project because I have Unity personal. So that's just a limitation of the software, I guess.
Even know.
Who's working
I'll
on
press space bar.
Working offline.
I've tried myself.
Is anyone else trying to do that too, or?
Do it.
Oh yeah.
Are you guys signed into Unity?
How will we
So
know?
if you save the project and then close it.
So start over and host.
I'll just open it and we'll see.
Yeah. Go back into Unity.
Save
So this
project
Unity
for
will actually show off. So close iOS.
and then close Unity,
Hit play.
reopen Unity,
And from there you can join.
click on my account, and then sign out. So I'll copy the steps over here also, just so everyone can see it. What I'm doing is saving everything, closing out of Unity, reopening Unity. And you won't have to do this for your own project. It's just because we're trying to collaborate together. My account and then sign out Jimmy O'Kelly. And then from there, since I'm not going to do that because I'm working on that project, you can then click Work Offline and then open the project back up. Yeah. So now if I build and run again, in windowed mode, I can see shoot, 1 second, no, that should work. Why is it not working? I think it was working and I just closed it. Sorry guys. Oh, sorry. I reopened it under master, didn't I? Okay.
With the Smash, it seems like you have to. Yeah. Unless you want.
Should be loading. I didn't think it actually mattered. So your initial scene you want first in your scene order, I think.
Yeah.
And that'll be the one. Okay.
So you want game to be first in the scene order?
For mine it was main, but it's just the one you have your network manager in. Cool. So I'm going to click for this time LAN host and allow access, just so firewall doesn't complain and stuff. And then if I also play it in the Unity editor and click LAN client, I should be in the same game. So now there's a problem, but it's also working. So two separate actual instances of the game, but they're networked. And actually, we might even be able to do, if you guys play the game, curious to see if it'll work, because it worked on my desktop and laptop, but I'm not entirely sure if it'll work here. I'll click Enable Matchmaker, and you do on yours too also. And then I'll click Create Internet Match, but I'll rename it to ISU first. Cool. So now if you click Join Internet Match, I'm curious whether you see ISU.
Where's that?
Enable Matchmaker.
I tried.
Okay, so should I just install this?
Join match.
Matchmaker, find it. No, also
Would it be fine?
What's that? Okay.
Do we need the same build of the game? Like I
no.
moved my ground down.
Yeah, you don't
Will
need.
it load your thing?
That's where it gets fixed. It's the differences in static components. I'm not entirely sure how that handles it. For one of my other games, it just like.
So I might be like underneath everybody, under the floor.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to do is.
It almost shows up. It says find internet thing. It says join match ISU.
Oh, you do have the ISU.
Yeah, now there's two of them. So this is straightforward.
Somebody else must have actually created it. So it's just doesn't.
So then when I do it,
I got two join ISUs now.
Yeah. Somebody else must have made a.
one of them just doesn't work.
Yeah.
One of them just died.
So what I'm going to do also now is just put one of my builds on the Google Drive. So that same link up there, the bit.ly one, I created a Drive folder. So I'm just going to go in to my builds, And actually, I should just make a folder here. Because my plan was to have everyone actually upload their build so we can start playing each other's games after a little while, in case the one-way didn't work. So I go into my folder, and I copy over. It's important that you copy over all of these right into there. It shouldn't take an extreme amount of time. And so then when that is done, we can test it out by having all of you guys download these 3 files. Is that already? Oh, not quite. And then if you double click on the executable, send executable, it should actually download correctly. Okay.
So if they go to the bit.ly ISU GDC networking, they should get to that page.
Yep. Which is just.
That's have that into the
Yep.
server.
It's,
That's also on the Discord. It's a second link.
So it's bit.ly / all lowercase ISU GDC networking. And then under place your builds here, Jamil. And then if you download those 3 files, make sure you keep them together in the same place because they all need to be in the same folder to actually execute correctly. How much time do we have? We have until 3? We have until 3 technically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Overscope the workshop, I think.
Mine crashes upon startup. Startup.
Oh, because we literally did this yesterday. Do you have the one that you boot Adam? Does it know that works?
Probably. Is anyone else having that?
Which ones are done?
All 3. Oh, sorry. On the. So it's actually under the. Yeah. Bit.ly / ISU. Yeah. You should may or may not know that.
Also don't think we have permission to do this.
Oh, Mac. You built Mac. So if you can, you also like build for different platforms. Which I don't know if this is going to work, but I'll try it anyway. So one way of doing it is just switching your target platform build. Yeah. Still same error. Has anyone else tried it? Running executable?
I got this one.
Oh, okay.
And then
So enable matchmaker. Create internet match. Or
find it in there.
well, I haven't created one yet. So
I'll create one.
so now you're default, I believe. So I should be able to.
We're together forever, Jamil.
Hmm?
Wait.
It's probably not me.
That's not you?
Somebody else join?
That's you?
Yeah, but
Yeah, there's no
Am I
join.
controlling?
Yeah.
Oh.
Wait,
So once you get in, it seems like it's working for a couple people.
wait.
I'm not sure. I guess re-download.
Yeah.
wait. What happens when somebody else moves? Because I just move all 3 people.
Yes. So
I'm moving you.
the problem that we're experiencing right now is back to. Let me open up my slideshow again.
Got 4 of us in.
Where is my duplication? So, the problem we're experiencing is that we're not checking who has local authority over this like original player. So on each client, so that's each person out here, has a copy of all players. And they are, since they're the same player object, they're actually running all of the code. And one of the lines in there just gets the input access, which is just WASD or arrow keys. And so you're actually able to move all characters or all player objects just by moving yourself. That is a problem, yeah. So
It'd be a
it's
fun
actually,
moment, though. Just everyone, you control everyone.
I have the
All of them.
so one way we could fix this is, good. One way we can fix this,
Another change it out for different.
sorry, let me upload the one Mac user here.
Yeah, delete. Never mind, it creates its own unique.
Think, yeah. So every Windows person, ignore the builds.app thing. That's all you'll need to actually run it.
Oh, just go over.
So back onto fixing this, you'll see that we're just getting the input.getAccess raw, which that is just 1 or 0, or 1, 0, or -1, depending upon which key you press, and assigning that to horizontal, and then we're just moving down here. You don't really need to look at that too much right now. It's just running by itself. So our actual code that we need to actually put in here is, yeah. So the first thing we'll do is add an if statement that checks if you're not, so is local player. Oh, one other thing I forgot to do for actually putting this, before putting this on GitHub, is to change this and add the using tag. So we have to add using Unity Engine, or Unity Engine dot networking. And then change mono behavior to network behavior. And so that gives us access to a bunch of different things. One of them is local player. So what this is saying is that on every fix update, and actually I should change that to just be in the update. So on every frame that the game is run, you're checking to see if the player, or if the player that you're trying to control is your local player. So you only have one local player, the one that's actually assigned to you when you actually start the game. So if you are the local player, then you want to run this code. If you're not the local player, then you just want to skip everything because you don't control that person, basically. And a better way to do this actually is just to put it outside, and if you're not the local player, then you just return. And that does effectively the same thing as the way I had it before. Cool? So I'll save that, go back into Unity, and I will test it before uploading just to make sure it works. Make sure everything regular still works, and then build and run.
The network transform?
Yes, I didn't do that.
I think it won't do it unless you have that.
Yeah. You're right. I read that on my notes and then I forgot to actually do it. So another thing we have to do, if we go to our player and we add another component, is the network transform.
Did you go back to the code?
Yeah, 1 second.
keep doing all.
Oh, okay. I can keep both up at once. Yeah. So we need to add the network transform component on here. And then that should be it. Problem with that is I'm building for Mac right now. 1 second.
Oh, wow. That's why we made it, just so that we know which files we're going
Rename what you said.
to. We named it 1, we could have named it 2.
It's just that you're saving over it. It says you don't need the old one.
Oh, yeah, but when you upload it.
Oh, yes. Otherwise, I'll just delete it, honestly.
Alright.
Okay. So now if I open 2 of the actual builds, both in windowed mode, I select that I want to be the host over here. So I have the both the server and the client over there, and then I connect to the LAN client over here. I should be able to move separately and independently from here. So switching back and forth. Cool. So then now I will upload this so you guys can have it. I'll delete that one too.
Yes. Oh, wait there, my friend.
Just because of that.
Cool. So, question. I misscoped the workspace a little bit, and I added quite a bit of stuff. What would you guys like to do after we get this working? I think we technically have another hour, but we can add health, shooting.
Should we add a jump?
We could add a jump.
I mean, that's just local, that's just
Yeah.
regular physics jump.
Yeah,
You wanna use your jump
but we're
code?
just pushing each other, right?
I don't even know where the jump is. I mean, all it does is
It's
you
in
just
the animation
add,
workshop. Yeah.
yeah, you just put rigid body. And, oh yeah, and detecting if you're on the ground.
No, you just do simple.
But you need to be able to jump once, you know, it's like jump.
Yeah.
No,
Well, let's say-
I want to break the game.
Okay, I'll just do an on get button instead of get button down, and then they can just fly. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So it's up there now. You guys should be able to download it and see whether or not you're able to move asynchronously, I guess?
Did you replace?
Yes.
one?
Yep. So it's the new one.
Well, there's one.
It's 1.
It's still just called one.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's still called the same pretty much. It's just I deleted the old one.
I deleted the old one for new one.
Yeah. See, it makes sense, Nate.
Shouldn't there be like a profile?
There was, but I changed it to Mac. So if you're running a Windows machine, you start it.
And I'm on the whole thing.
What are you guys thinking so far?
I'm finding that it's got a lot of stuff built in that makes it really easy to use. I made a real-time game using Android Studio, and it was a fucking nightmare.
Oh, yes, yes.
So this is already like about as much as we got done in a semester worth of work.
Because you have to use volley, and then you have to use callbacks on volley.
Yeah, it's pretty awful, so I really like the fact that this has so much built in, and it's so easy to use. Big fan of that already. This makes me want to do a network game. It's pretty cool.
If you guys want, I know that we're not going to get through everything today. I can record me like doing most of the rest of the steps and then post that.
That works.
Did you open it up and make a map?
I haven't yet. I will do that now.
I want to knock you off.
I want a mini map.
What if we had a macro map?
A macro map.
You play in this small square, but the rest of the screen is your map.
But that requires wrap bits instead of wrap bytes. Oh, there it is.
There we go.
I'm stuck in the middle.
So another thing you guys might notice is that moving other players is near impossible. That's because physics on networking is something you probably don't actually want. So the next one will actually disable the box glider, or just set it to as a trigger or whatnot. It's just that creating...
Wouldn't it be physics material?
No, you just set the box glider to trigger instead. Or no,
You just get triggered.
No, you need to do the layers thing.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Oh boy!
Oh my god.
Look at that! Look at that!
Oh, get back up there. No, dang it.
Alright, so I'll leave that up for now.
Somebody show up. So you can launch something.
So another thing, a couple things that we want to do to actually improve this
Just leave it back.
is to create a layer. So we want our player object, this is not necessarily a networking thing, but it will come to affect your networking a lot. We want to have our players not collide with other players, but collide with other things. One way to do that in Unity is by adding a layer. So if you go to Inspector, click on your player prefab, go to the Inspector, click on Layer, and then Add Layer. You could add another layer, call it Ignore, whatever you want to call it, but just descriptive enough. Ignore player. Sure, I guess. So then if you go back into player, click up here and change it to the ignore player layer, and you want to change the children also. So then to actually apply what we are trying to do now, we have to go to Edit, Project Settings, and Player? No, Edit, Project Setting, no, that's Build Setting.
Edit, isn't it in Project Settings Physics 2D?
Is it? Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
cool.
Layer matrix.
So this is a matrix detailing what can interact with each other. So what we want to disable is ignore player layer can't interact with another ignore player layer. Basically, players don't touch each other.
Did you make that layer rhyme intentionally?
They rhymed?
Player layer?
Oh. No.
Because I liked it.
It's nice. Save again. And should I upload this one, or do we want to add jumping first?
Let's get jumping.
Jumping? Yeah? Cool. So that's just a couple lines of code. All we want to do is in update, or in fixed update?
Update for input.
Yeah, that'd be better probably.
Just you need to make a bool of like jumping right now. So you can work.
But we could do floating actually then too. That'd be easier for everybody else to floating and just like get button. So like if have an if statement and then input dot get button with a key code. This is just how you do input in Unity. Key code dot space
Yeah, I know, I'm saying like you'll need a bool so that you can actually in fixed update add the stuff, so you know if you've actually pressed space or not.
Okay, yeah.
Just like jumping or something.
Float is a keyword. Don't use float.
Floating.
Good enough.
And then in that if you can just say, like in the body of it, you can just say jump is equal to true.
Yeah. Do you know why this is?
What?
Is space not a button?
Or
get key, maybe?
Not get key.
That makes sense. Get key code. Yes.
Yeah.
And then we want to make another function called jump or something like that.
Well, no, we could just set jump is equal to true, and then in the fixed update just say if jump.
Sure.
Then add that. That's probably easier.
Lesson from that is there's a billion different ways to do things.
Yeah.
Um,
And then you probably actually want else jump is false up there. So
well, we can just, yeah.
repeatedly, right?
Oh no,
Is it space bar one's in the middle of that?
Sorry? What's up?
No, I was making a joke.
Oh, okay.
Once you hit space, you can never go back. You have now you have now set jump to true. You have locked your fade.
So if you are jumping, then you want to set your velocity dot y equal to.
You can't set.
You can't. That's right.
Yeah, you need to do the whole thing is equal to. It's really dumb.
Yeah. So in Unity or in C# Unity, your velocity actually is immutable, and what that means is that your so velocity is made up of a vector 3, which just has 3 variables in it, x, y, and z. They made it so you can't actually just access rb.velocity.x or whatever and then change it. You have to set it equal to a new vector, and since we're in 2D, it's a vector 2. And then the way you access this is you go rb.velocity.x, because we're not changing the x, so we just want to feed the same x back in, and then we just put a value in.
10, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter.
The best way to do it.
We'll be setting it every frame, so it won't matter. Like, even if we put it at 1, we'll slowly start floating up.
Yeah.
So, like,
not Master
How
Master.
long
No.
will it take me to
I'm gonna put it at
each
5
frame
for
it's
now.
setting the velocity.
Oh, after it does accelerate.
Because we all float up.
Oh, you know,
down
actually,
here.
maybe you're right. I'm not sure.
Jimmy, one way that I started doing that,
Yeah.
I've made a new vector 3, set that equal to the velocity, then gone into that and just changed the y and set the velocity equal to the new one. It makes less of a stupid line, but that works as well.
Yeah. I'll leave it like this just because I like short break for now, but that does make a lot of sense. Because I've been doing the same for color.
Oh, and it's 2D. When it's 3D, it gets a little bit more complex.
You need to say using Unity Engine.
Yeah, she was busy helping me.
Dude, you're getting so technical right there.
At Unity Engine.
So what I'm doing now is just changing, so I have the variable jump speed visible in the inspector, because I don't actually know. Did it not apply?
If it's not,
Just open something else up.
Public. So if you make it public, it should be actually visible in the
Did you save it?
inspector. It did, I think.
Is there an error somewhere?
Sorry.
I'm getting some error with the X in your.
Given it's on play right now?
I have movement on player, yeah.
No, I'm saying like, is it playing like the game? No, it's not.
No. Is somebody still in here?
It's your boy.
Yeah, boy.
I'll stop this now.
Oh, you monster.
Well, we can always just modify it through the code too.
Oh, you're right there. See, I knew where it was. It's weird. Yeah, I'm calling it this. I think it's
Not quite enough.
Is it not quite enough, or is it not doing it at all?
We'll see.
You should just be able to hold it.
Yeah, no, it's not doing it at all.
You can change buildings.
Yeah, no, like,
Try building it. Like manually just hitting build to make sure that it's actually going through to Unity. No, not the project, like in the code. Just select a build at the top.
I've never done that. Build solution. Build.
Yeah, build like that.
This is not where I expected to have trouble at. Okay, debug log then.
Yeah, I don't know why that's being like that.
So one thing you want to probably do a lot in actually programming is put a lot of debug.log statements in, which actually just show you where your code is going. So now I'll be able to see whether it's actually registering whether I press space or not. And it is not.
It's really odd.
Let's change the key code. E. Sure.
Mine doesn't usually compile that fast.
I have an SSD.
Oh, that makes like infinitely more sense.
That's not working. Okay, we're just gonna. This is your code.
Is this okay?
Yeah. So that's actually the movement we want jumping.
What was this on?
Animation workshop.
Oh, with the chip in. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's try to figure out what this is.
Input.getKey, keycode dot space or E.
Yeah, and then jump is true. And then in fixed update it says if jump pressed, and then it does that.
Okay, I can just skip on to the next thing.
That's super weird.
Once again, I'll make a thing when I have some time to and like post it to YouTube or whatnot. So one of the next things that we could do is actually, so it's hard to tell what your which one is you in the game still. So one thing we could do is add an override method. So that would look like identify, yes. So in our movement script, we will add a new function called public override. And override just means that this is already implemented. It's called a signature. So like the signature of fixed update is void fixed update, and it doesn't accept any parameters. So override just means that the signature exists already because of network behavior, but we're just taking it and implementing a new thing for it. So void doesn't return anything. On start local player, and it autofills some of this stuff out. We don't necessarily need this, but what this means is it just does everything that the original on local play start did, and then it will actually let us do whatever we want to now. What we want to do is get component type of, and I think I might have, yeah, so the way I have it is that the graphic object is actually under in the, so I'll show you. So I have the player object, and then I have the graphics object, which has the sprite renderer on it. So what we want to do is, what is it? Get component. Is it get component in children, which just looks in the children, and which the child is the graphics object, and we can get the component of type sprite, SPR sprite renderer, and then that fills out that command, and then we want to get the dot color of it, and we will set it to color dot and whatever you want to actually your player to be. I'll have mine be green. So if you save that,
won't that be the same for everyone? Because they're all using the both?
yeah, I guess it will be.
You can just do a random value for each.
Yeah, was it random.range?
Huh?
Oh, color is a random thing?
Okay, do color, oh, I don't have it open.
Are you using random.range, or are you using?
Just do, color can take in 0 to 1s, a set of 4 0 to 1s, well 3 0 to 1s, and set the last 0
Wait.
in 1. Color equals new color. I mean, dot color equals new color. Open, and then just do, yeah.
That's it.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. So you have to do 0 to 255.
Yeah, then you do color 32.
Wait, color 32.
New color 32. Color is bit. I mean, color is.
Come up here and type it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, give me my jump words.
I just can't jump in games.
Yeah, no, it's really strange.
This is what makes games hard.
Hey Jacob, is this random call working correctly, do you think?
I thought it was just random.range.
This is what came up when I did. Oh, random.range is a thing. Chill. Rip.
Expand the window. Otherwise,
You can just there's a color random
There is?
function, yeah.
Well, we don't want it too dark.
Color HSV, and you can just put it in. Just get rid of the whole new color check.
Oh, the opacity.
Yeah.
Just put it in the random. The color.
I think that's probably hover over it. It's probably just the wrong thing.
And
Returns
Just put it.
here.
oh wait, sorry. It's an int. We need to turn it into a bit.
There's a thing that does it though.
Why don't you just call the actual random color then?
Because we already got this line.
We're trying to do a better job. Stick it in. It really doesn't matter.
Here we go. There we go. Save it. Load it.
So we will see if this should work where it since I'm the local player, it should generate a random color. Oh. No, that should still work.
I feel like it's not loading changes to your script because it wasn't doing that for jump either.
That might be what it is.
If it's not connected.
It might be that you're wrong.
Oh, wait,
You have the wrong script.
I only have one script, and it's saving somewhere. It's
probably saving online. It might have been the one that he uploaded, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I uploaded it straight from.
Oh, you're right. Maybe because I opened it from the desktop first, and I downloaded it again to show you guys how to.
Oh.
Yep, there it is. So all that stuff that we're trying to do before probably works, but we just didn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
grab the other code.
So I'll just retype this. Public override
This somewhere.
void. And I never changed this. Sorry, everybody.
Finally got my Bluetooth controller with me. Firmware was just shot on it, so.
It's not spelled correctly, it's violations first.
Using Unity Engine .networking.
Yeah, that's fine.
Net BEHAVIOU.
Oh, is it British? Is it the weird spelling?
I found a couple things like that, so it might be BEHAV.
That's just how it is.
Is it IOR or IOUR?
IOUR.
Yeah, it's IOUR. You have it as IOR.
Cool. Spelling's important. On start local player. And then we'll go get component in children, type of IT render.
Just do random dot color.
Random dot color.
Yeah, you should autofill the rest.
Oh.
And a semicolon.
Did I miss it?
Yeah, that probably.
Cool. So now, every time we run it, we should get a random color because we are overriding the on-start local player and getting the component and actually assigning a random color. So if we build settings,
You should probably put in the is local player for the install.
did I not put that?
No, because it didn't say anything past the original.
Why did that work then?
Very carefully.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. You can probably put in jumping really quick.
Okay.
Five is a good number for the force or the speed of jumping. By the way.
Okay. Code dot space. Enter to. Okay. That makes sense though, because it was loading right away. And I didn't actually have to wait that small tick to actually get it to compile. Okay. So now.
That's what I was confused at, because I was like, is it even saving? That's what I was asking. And I was like, man, it's gone like instant.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I was like super cocky because I had a SSD. I'm like, yeah. That's why. Yeah. Alright. Okay. So do you guys see how this kind of thing could be applied to like a bigger project, switching between this local player and whatnot? So you can either make look at that. Thank you for coming. You can make both like a general multiplayer thing or kind of a turn-based multiplayer. In that the server would actually control whose turn it is, whatnot. And I'll make sure I get this, the rest of everything actually detailed and put online for everyone to go over if they want to. So the Windows version is done uploading.
I think I was getting that crash because I just got it again. Because I think I downloaded it while it was uploading.
Oh,
like half
that could do
files.
it.
Which, you know, in my experience tends to not work when you're using half the file.
So let me start. Going to. Enable matchmaker. Okay. And one thing that you'll find is that we're not actually managing what other people look like and actually sending that over the network. One way we could do that, I'm not sure if we'll have time for it. We might, depending on how you guys want to say, but probably not. We'll probably stop after this just because we've had it. But,
Well, what?
Yeah, so.
He's in free space.
It's only 20 wide, but your camera doesn't follow you, so. So yeah, you actually have full control over your own player, but since, and I'll jump back to the code, we're only checking on start local player. We're not checking to see what other people look like in their colors and whatnot. So like one way we could do that is to add a color C gets, or just color, whatever the color is. And then this is getting to the part where I talked about like the sync var. And one thing to keep in mind with this is that not all things are things you can put sync vars on, sync variables. So like random game object that you want to sync up, though that actually won't work. There's actually a list of list of sync var, because I was trying to sync up a texture 2D so that we could actually have different sprites and see the other sprites. But if you look at the API, it talks about you can only have sync var types on basic types, built-in math types. So vector 3 is one of the best ones for that. And then structs. Yeah.
They have the two above types.
Oh, yeah. So, what was I going to go through? So then you'll have to find out another way to do that. One way you could do that, or work around different kinds of things, is by building in different sprites in your game, and then just syncing up whichever sprite the character wants to use. So say they choose, like, from a list of sprites, they choose number 2. You sync var the integer that they choose, and then sync that up on the actual on the server. So the server actually manages what the other players look like on your local host. Aside from that, everything else would be a bit much to jump into now, since we only have about 12 minutes left. If you guys are good, then thank you for coming to the networking workshop. Hope you learned a little bit, and it's not too daunting to get into, hopefully, because I found it daunting to get into during the actual game jam, just because I started looking at all the API stuff and all that. I recommend actually some of the resources. I recommend looking at, if you're still interested, specifically Quill18 Creates on YouTube. He has quite a few good tutorials over networking. One older one and one newer one. Brackeys just in general has a lot of good content on actually creating games in Unity. Unity docs, but like, yeah, don't knock it till you look at it. And then just in general, the Game Maker's Toolkit's really cool. Mark Brown, good stuff. Cool.
I sort of mentioned this in the exec meeting that when you look up certain stuff online, especially with programming and game making, it's super, super convoluted and super confusing. And sometimes it's best to just get like a personal account from someone who uses it and just see how to actually use it. So like, I'm sure if I went and looked up how to do networking on Unity, I'd be super confused at all of it, but it's much easier when it's presented in a form like this to understand what's actually going on.
Yeah.
So that's why looking at the Unity docs might be nice, but looking at the YouTube channel you put up there is probably going to be better, because you're going to have a personal account of someone actually using it and showing you how it works.
Very true. So, would recommend. I think that's all I have. Oh yeah, best practices. But yeah, who needs best practices? Yeah.
Yes.
If anybody has any questions about stuff, I can like stay around for a little bit and like answer them if I can.